Welcome to NTD News. I'm Jasmina Davis. Here are today's top stories. 2 officers are recovering after being shot last night in Louisville, Kentucky. It happened amid unrest over the Breonna Taylor court decision. President Trump wants states to get ready for the distributing of the vaccine. His administration announced $200 million of CARES Act funding will go to support this move. A joint congressional report is looking into certain business practices by Joe Biden's son Hunter. It outlines potential conflicts of interest between the Bidens and Ukraine and zeroes in on what some consider Hunter's questionable dealings. A Florida attorney general is calling for an investigation into a donation made by Michael Bloomberg. He has given millions of dollars to pay off felons' debts, granting them a vote in November. The FBI is warning about cyberfraud surrounding the upcoming election. They said foreign actors may spread disinformation to influence voters. And Secretary of State Mike Pompeo warns of Chinese influence on American government and politics. He says politicians must stand together to counter it. 2 officers have been shot in Louisville, Kentucky. It's not clear if it's related to unrest over a grand jury decision in the Breonna Taylor case. 2 police officers were shot Wednesday in downtown Louisville shortly before 8:30 p.m., ahead of a 9 p.m. curfew. It happened amid growing unrest following the Breonna Taylor grand jury decision. The interim police chief said both officers were in stable condition with non-life-threatening injuries. 1 person has been taken into custody. It's unclear if the shootings are related to the protests. The FBI said it responded to the shooting and will continue to assist in the investigation. Earlier in the day, a Kentucky grand jury brought no murder charges against any of the 3 police officers involved in Breonna Taylor's death. 1 former police officer was indicted for wanton endangerment. He blindly fired 10 shots into Taylor's apartment after Taylor's boyfriend shot his colleague in the leg. Kentucky's governor urged the state attorney general to post all the evidence he can find online.
I trust Kentuckians. They deserve to see the facts for themselves. And I believe that the ability to process those facts helps everybody.
Kentucky Attorney General Daniel Cameron said officers knocked on the door and announced themselves before entering. Cameron said justice is not often easy. It does not fit the mold of public opinion, and it does not conform to shifting standards. It answers only to the facts and to the law. If we simply act on emotion or outrage, there is no justice. Mob justice is not justice. Louisville's mayor declared a state of emergency Tuesday. Black Lives Matter protesters and agitators marched that night, and on Wednesday, streamed footage showed protesters calling for violence. Some said they should burn the city down. The National Guard was activated. Officers shot Breonna Taylor in her home in March during a drug trafficking investigation gone wrong. Taylor's family settled with the city for $12 million last week. The suspect arrested in the shooting of 2 Louisville police officers has been identified as 26-year-old Lorenzo Johnson. He is charged with assault of a police officer and wanton endangerment. President Trump commenting on reports the FDA is altering its approval process for a COVID vaccine. He says it sounds like a political move and that the focus should be on helping to prevent people from getting sick.
The Trump administration announced $200 million of CARES Act funding will go to all 50 states in anticipation of a CCP virus vaccine approval. The president said this is to make the necessary preparations to quickly get vaccines to high-priority groups.
To distribute the vaccine to high-risk residents, and we want to do that the instant it is approved, not the following day, but the following moment.
The FDA is... A reporter questioned the president about reports that the FDA may announce stricter controls on vaccine approval, thereby delaying the process.
That sounds like a political move, because when you have Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, Moderna, these great companies coming up with the vaccines, and they've done testing and everything else, I'm saying, why would they have to be, adding great length to the process?
The president has promised speedy delivery of a vaccine, aiming to make one available by the end of this year, even ahead of the November election. Some see the move to slow down the vaccine approval process as a tactic to hamper the president from achieving this goal. Top Democrats have received criticism for making negative comments about the safety of a potential vaccine.
There is zero cutting of safety concerns. There should be no hesitation about the safety.
White House advisor on the virus, Dr. Scott Atlas, said it makes no sense to criticize the speed at which a vaccine is being developed. He said it should be seen as an achievement. He said vaccine development and approval is a matter of urgency due to the pandemic.
The House Majority Leader is calling for votes on a stimulus package, even without it receiving bipartisan support. Steny Hoyer said he thinks the House should respond to the Senate and put into legislation the amount of resources the House is prepared to deal with. He added he hopes the bill will pass the Senate, but he didn't necessarily expect it to, saying the Senate will do with it what they will. Last week, a $1.5 trillion proposal offered by a group of bipartisan House lawmakers was rejected by House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Billionaire Michael Bloomberg donated $16 million to a cause that is paying off felons' debts to allow them to vote. A Florida attorney general is calling for an investigation. Here's the latest on the 2020 U.S. presidential election coverage.
Florida Attorney General Ashley Moody requested investigation into a donation made by billionaire Michael Bloomberg. Bloomberg donated $16 million to a group that is paying off felon prisoners' debts. Attorney General Moody stated in a letter to the FBI and Florida Department of Law Enforcement that further inquiry is needed. The donated funds enable felon prisoners to legally vote in this year's presidential election. Bloomberg has helped raise more than $20 million in total for the cause. The donations help to skirt a federal appellate court ruling made on September 11th that defines what it means for felons to complete a sentence. The court ruled that Florida felons must pay all fines, restitution, and legal fees before they can regain their right to vote. That's in addition to serving their sentences. The case could have broad implications for the November elections as it could prevent recently released felons from voting. Florida has 29 electoral college votes. Bloomberg has also pledged $100 million to help Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden win Florida.
U.S. senators released a joint congressional report about the former vice president's son outlining the potential conflicts of interest between the Bidens and Ukraine. Part of their findings were what they considered Hunter Biden's questionable business deals.
While 2020 Democratic candidate Joe Biden was vice president, his son Hunter was offered a position on the board of Burisma, a Ukrainian gas company, in 2014. He accepted the offer, but a new congressional report says the former Deputy Assistant Secretary of the U.S. Embassy in Ukraine called Hunter's board position awkward for all U.S. officials pushing an anti-corruption agenda there. The Republican chairman behind the report say the perception of a potential conflict of interest was raised to the vice president's office in 2015, but it was never addressed. Again that year, the report says a State Department official brought up the issue, saying it gave Russia the ability to spread disinformation and risk undermining U.S. policy in Ukraine. Burisma paid Hunter and his brother, according to the report, over $4 million for their board memberships. Critics of Joe and his family claim the Bidens appear to have suspiciously profited from Joe's government influence. Joe Biden has said it was a bad image, but that no one has found anything wrong with his son's dealings. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
The FBI is warning about potential cyber fraud during the election. The Bureau says cyber criminals could create false websites and social media content to spread disinformation. Their goal is to discredit the electoral process and undermine U.S. democracy. Our reporter Kevin Hogan spoke with a fraud expert on how widespread this is and how you can protect yourself.
Turning to the cyber arena.
According to the FBI, foreign actors and cyber criminals may be attempting to interfere with the 2020 election results. Mail-in voting may cause the results to be delayed. The FBI says cyber criminals may exploit this delay by sending out false reports of voter suppression and by launching cyber attacks on election infrastructure. Cybersecurity expert Robert Siciliano says hackers can easily clone government websites and send out links to these false sites through various means.
Once these clone websites are created, then the disinformation campaign begins to seed links to that particular site through social media and through phishing email campaigns. So the majority of the traffic is generated via word of mouth, via social media. And once the disinformation articles are created with links to those particular sites and they go viral, then they become very popular and the bad guys in this case win.
Siciliano says people on disinformation campaigns will do this to fool people into voting on false sites, distract voters, or even mislead them with false information to corrupt their vote. He says it only takes basic software to create these campaigns and multiply the false websites, blogs, and social media profiles with anywhere from 5 to 1,000 people working on a campaign worldwide.
Those that are responsible for creating these mis- and disinformation campaigns, they have armies of coders, people that are setting up fake profiles on various social media platforms. They are setting up fake blogs, fake websites that are designed to express a campaign's end goal in mind, generally utilizing mis- and disinformation.
According to the Pew Research Center, 75% of Americans think other countries will try to interfere with the 2020 election. And U.S. intel officials said China, Russia, and Iran are trying to do just that. Siciliano says if an article immediately causes an emotional reaction, it may be designed as disinformation to influence the voter. He says it's important for voters to do their own research and seek out the facts.
Make your own informed decisions opposed to simply reacting emotionally and then sharing that information with everybody in your life because you're so upset about it and then just being a victim of disinformation.
The FBI recommends seeking out information from trustworthy sources such as state and local election officials. The Bureau says to report suspicious posts to the social media companies and to let the FBI know of any disinformation about the manner, time, or location of voting. Kevin Hogan, NTD News, New York.
Coming up, the NYPD commissioner gave details on the recent spike in violent crimes. He advised businesses to stay calm as the police force works to protect city streets. And New York City's mayor announced a plan to furlough even more city employees, just 1 week after he furloughed nearly 500. It's an attempt to help the city's enormous budget problem. Over the course of the nationwide Black Lives Matter protests, many have voiced grievances that the American government has failed them since the nation's founding. This phenomenon led national scholars, Congress members, and the president to look closely at how students learn about American history. They found that students are learning an incomplete version of events, and it's turning students against America's founding principles. So a nonprofit organization is working on a curriculum that rejects the idea that anti-Black racism is at the root of America's founding. NTD's Melina Weisskopf spoke to the scholar who's piecing together the new curriculum to find out more about it.
If you choose to only look at one aspect of our country's history, only focus on the racial oppression, then you can create the impression that this country is forever doomed to that.
That's why Ian Rowe is working with other scholars in the 1776 Unites campaign to develop curricula that teaches young American citizens what they call a more complete account of slavery's history in America.
So part of the goal with the 1776 Unites curriculum is to tell stories of largely unknown African-American figures who, again, embraced the founding ideals of the country. So Biddy Mason, a woman who was born a slave and ultimately died a millionaire and became a great philanthropist, is someone.
Along with learning about these biographies, this K-12 curriculum encourages students to discuss topics like integrity, resilience, agency, and to reflect on their own inner character. Robert Woodson is the founder of the 1776 initiative. He describes it as an inspirational alternative to what he calls the lethal narrative that claims America was built on structural racism.
And it offers no solutions at all to the problem. They're saying that America is defined by race and just leaves it there.
To create a curriculum that combats this perspective, Rowe turned to his decade of experience teaching students from lower socioeconomic statuses. He told us the key is to inspire kids to take control over their future.
But utilizing the power of family, the power of faith, the power of free enterprise, the power of hard work to achieve even despite the odds.
Rose says the goal is to have these lessons available anywhere character is being developed. The new lesson plans were just released and have already seen great success, with thousands of downloads in just under a week's time. It can be taught anywhere in the country, and free downloads are available at 1776unites.com. Reporting by Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
Woodson Center's new curriculum came out around the same time that President Trump announced his plan to sign an executive order. Trump's EO is called the 1776 Commission and promotes patriotic education in schools. But Rowe told us they have not had support from the president for lesson plans as of now. And New York City's Mayor Bill de Blasio announced he would be furloughing over 9,000 more workers in an effort to fix the city's enormous budget problem. De Blasio already furloughed nearly 500 employees just 1 week prior to this announcement.
This new furlough is an expansion of the previous one. Now de Blasio's measure will impact all managerial and non-represented city employees. More than 9,000 employees will have to be furloughed for 1 week between October and March.
Today, another furlough action. And it's a difficult one because it will affect real people and their lives. It will affect their families. And these are people who have been working nonstop for months trying to protect all of you.
The mayor says this plan will save $21 million on top of the estimated $1 million saved from the earlier furlough. The city administration is still said to be in talks with labor groups in Albany. Their aim is to find savings and prevent layoffs.
And we continue our conversations with the labor unions. We continue our conversations with Albany, trying to get relief. We don't have results yet.
De Blasio said a federal stimulus is what would really solve the budget problem, adding that it is shocking a stimulus still hasn't happened. According to the New York Post, the president of the Citizens Budget Commission had a more critical take on the mayor's decisions. He said in the face of a multi-year financial crisis, the mayor has turned to borrowing and layoffs when he has other options that he should exercise instead. According to a report by the Citizens Budget Commission, the city can save upwards of $1 billion if they reduce their spendings. Examples include increasing productivity at the Department of Sanitation, centralizing procurement of goods and services, and trimming the generous health care programs.
Are you ready for 2020 to be over? You're not the only one. The new year is just a couple months away, and the infamous Times Square ball drop is going to have a new look. It's going virtual. The news about the ball drop dropped Wednesday. Organizers say they want to ring in 2021, quote, visually, virtually, and safely. They say there will still be live entertainment, but it'll be limited, though all of that is still in the works. The New York City Police Commissioner commented on how the NYPD is working with businesses to make the city safer. He guaranteed there will be a significant drop in violent crime as the end of the year approaches.
During nightly BLM protests, businesses in New York City fell victim to looting and property damage, but they're now facing a potential new danger. Over 240 shootings occurred in August. Murders have also increased by 50%. In a recent interview with Crain's New York Business, NYPD Commissioner Dermot Shea reassured business owners that they're not alone.
I've had meeting after meeting this week with people from business communities, representatives from New York City that above all else say that they're concerned and they're worried about their city. And what I try to do every time is to, number one, put them at ease, let them know that we'll be there with them. Number two, give them a plan. And that's probably the hardest point now with everything that we're facing.
Shea said the $1 billion cut to the NYPD's budget caused the uptick in violent crime. The budget cut came amid demands to defund the police over what protesters call systematic racism. But according to some business owners, the more police, the better.
The crime is little bit before now is a little bit increased, the crime situation. So I think the police, the watching is need more. This is the very essential for the small business.
One of them said the suppression of law enforcement could lead to more crimes.
They have to let the police do their job, and by the city or the politicians holding the police back, spikes in crime will just go up.
The city's bail reform law has allowed criminals to be released without bail shortly after being arrested. Commissioner Shea said violent crime will drop once the justice system is fully unleashed.
So it's slow and steady, but we are seeing, John, some improvement here. As those courts really open up even further, we are going to have some significant impact in terms of driving violence down. I guarantee it.
The commissioner said it's important to know the positives in the middle of this dark period and for New Yorkers to stick together.
A man received a unique honor in New York for chasing down a suspect in a subway train derailment. The Metropolitan Transportation Authority gave Ricky and Wilder a year of free unlimited subway and bus rides. They say Wilder caught Demetrius Harvard throwing construction debris onto the tracks of a subway on Sunday. According to investigators, Wilder jumped into the tracks and removed the debris. He got out of the way just before a train came into the station. The MTA says Harvard threw more debris out. This debris caused a train with 135 passengers to derail. Officials say Wilder reported the derailment, then stopped Harvard as he tried to leave the scene. Harvard was taken into custody. None of the passengers in the derailment were injured. And still to come, Chinese police are collecting blood samples from residents, but refusing to tell them why. It's not the first time it's happened either. And Hong Kong police have arrested prominent pro-democracy activist Joshua Wong. It links to our charges being made over last year's pro-democracy protests. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is warning U.S. politicians to stay alert over potential Chinese influence on American politics. During a speech in Wisconsin, he said Beijing sees local governments as weak links and opportunities to sway public opinion, but asserted that American officials must be prepared to counter it.
In a speech to Wisconsin lawmakers at the state capitol, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo warned of Chinese influence on American government and politics, especially at the state and local level. He said Chinese Communist leader Xi Jinping is aware that the U.S. federal government is pushing back against the CCP. That's why Beijing has been trying even harder to target local U.S. officials to circumvent America's sovereignty.
He thinks local leaders may well be the weak link.
The Secretary of State points out that Wisconsin's retirement system is investing in China Mobile and China Telecom. Both are state-owned companies and are an integral part of the Chinese regime's surveillance system.
Do you want your teachers, your firefighters, your policemen invested in those kinds of activities?
Pompeo came at the invitation of Republican Senate President Roger Roth, who had previously received an email from a Chinese consulate official asking him to praise China's efforts to control the virus. The senator replied with one word, nuts. Pompeo also cited another example of the CCP exerting influence on local politicians and working to silence their support for Chinese dissident groups in the U.S.
2017, a California state senator proposed a bill merely expressing support for the Falun Gong practitioners in America and in China. It was hortatory. It was a rhetorical resolution. These people that he was speaking to have suffered as tremendously under the Chinese Communist Party's crackdowns on religious freedom as any others. Unfortunately, the California State Senate bowed to the CCP pressure and shelved the proposed bill.
He said the State Department was reviewing the activities of two organizations of China's United Front Work Department operating in the U.S., the U.S.-China Friendship Association and the China Council for the Promotion of Peaceful Reunification. Pompeo said the groups are trying to influence U.S. schools, business groups, and politicians. He called on politicians from different sides to work together and counter the CCP's influence.
Telling the truth about China isn't remotely partisan. It's principled. Democrat, Republican, Independent. You have a friend in the Trump administration to help you push back against the CCP's exploitation of our open society. Let's do this together for the American people and the future of the greatest democracy in history.
Penny Zhou, NTD News.
And more Chinese-made KN95 masks fail to meet safety standards. This after the U.S. ordered hundreds of thousands from China to deal with the shortage in the U.S. NTD's Tiffany Meyer brings us more on the story.
In some countries, cases of the Chinese Communist Party virus are rising again. Facing this, new attention is given to the quality of protective gear, and Chinese medical masks are once again shown to be not meeting the standards. One of the largest patient safety groups in the U.S., ECRI, says most of the KN95 masks it tested failed to meet U.S. standards for filtration. This exposes medical staff to a higher risk of being infected with the CCP virus. U.S. hospitals bought hundreds of thousands of KN95 masks from China since the outbreak, as a way to deal with a shortage of U.S.-made N95 masks. KN95 masks are the Chinese equivalent of N95 masks in the U.S. As the name suggests, they are supposed to filter at least 95% of airborne particles. But researchers at ECRI found that 60 to 70% of imported KN95 masks don't meet that requirement. The American oil company Chevron has asked its global employees to remove the Chinese social media app WeChat from their work phones. The request makes the company one of the first to take action following President Trump's recent executive order, banning the app over what the White House deems national security risks. The oil giant reached out to its employees via a staff email, requesting that the app be deleted within days. Those who fail to comply will have their devices disconnected from the company's network. Neither Chevron nor Tencent have publicly commented on the matter. WeChat has become a top target in the U.S. crackdown on China, joining other Chinese-made apps like TikTok. WeChat boasts 19 million regular users in the U.S. and more than 1 billion worldwide. Sweden's state-owned space company says it will no longer renew contracts with China or accept new Chinese businesses. The Sweden Space Corporation provides ground stations that help fly Chinese spacecraft and transmit data. Its contracts with Beijing have allowed the Chinese regime to access its antennas in Sweden, Chile, and Australia since 2011. But amid a changing geopolitical situation, it's making the change. According to the Swedish Defense Research Agency, China could make military use of its access to antennas at a Swedish ground station. A professor of space law and policy said China wants to remove its dependence on the U.S.-owned GPS navigation system, adding that it's part of China's broader plan to expand its global influence. Following our recent report on the arrest of Chinese dissident and poet Wang and his wife, which left Wang's mother and 4 young children under house arrest, some of our viewers asked how they were able to have 4 children. That's because, until recently, China staunchly enforced its famous one-child policy. The one-child policy was in effect until 2015, when authorities announced a slight lessening of the restriction. Now, families are limited to 2 children. The one-child policy led to many problems in Chinese society. For example, the ratio of younger adults to older adults began to shrink, causing problems for the country's workforce. Likewise, the population of men began to greatly exceed the population of women. That's because parents often chose to abort female babies in favor of having male children. Back to poet Wang Zhang. We can't confirm why he has 4 children. But normally, when Chinese citizens seek to have more children than is allowed by the regime, the mother must hide from authorities while pregnant. After the child is born, the parents are also forced to pay a huge monetary fine as punishment.
Villagers in China have been reportedly forced to give blood samples to authorities, but no one seems willing to tell them why, and it's not the first time the unusual practice has been reported.
First, we look to China's southern Hunan province. That's where locals say police officers have been collecting blood samples for residents. They're thought to be acting on orders from the Chinese regime. So far, the officers have provided no explanation. On top of that, the police officers reportedly haven't taken any measures to prevent the spread of the CCP or Chinese Communist Party virus. One villager, Li Yuan, told us that police didn't show any documentation when they came to collect samples. To protect his identity, we gave him a pseudonym.
He didn't have any relevant documents. If a certain department wants to collect blood, it must have relevant documents and must show them to everyone to make it clear. It doesn't work if they just do it at will this way.
Lee said the person who collected his blood refused to tell him why the samples were being taken.
He said that the police station asked him to collect blood. He told me not to ask too many questions as if it's very confidential.
Lee explained that many of the locals didn't want to give samples, but because the police officers came in uniform, they felt pressured into submitting. Lee added that he felt the same way. He also recalled that no medical personnel were present when the blood samples were collected.
Many people have had their blood collected. I called them to ask about it. Now they're panicking. It's because of the virus transmission risk. Everyone was afraid and didn't know what was going on. What if it's contagious?
Later, Lee asked his village chief and the head of the police station what the samples were needed for, but they told him they didn't know either. Locals say police mainly took samples from adult men. This isn't the first case of mass blood sampling in China. The Uyghur ethnic group in the Xinjiang region was subjected to it, as well as Christians and practitioners of Falun Gong, a spiritual meditation discipline that's been brutally persecuted by the regime for over 20 years. Other Chinese people also had blood samples taken, including those who were viewed as enemies of the regime, like human rights activists and dissidents. In the early 2000s, China's Ministry of Public Security began to establish a nationwide DNA database. According to Human Rights Watch, China's DNA collection practices may not be specifically linked to criminal investigations. Public security officers collect a large number of biological data from ordinary citizens. That's because the collection of so-called basic information is considered one of the regime's goals. But according to Chinese law, the collection of DNA samples by public security agencies should be limited to specific criminal cases. NTD News.
Prominent pro-democracy activist Joshua Wong is in Hong Kong police custody for law violations from last year. He was arrested today while reporting to a police station. According to his lawyer, democracy activist Joshua Wong was arrested while at a police station for another case for which he is currently on trial. This arrest is for participating in unauthorized assembly in October 2019 and violating the city's anti-mask law. Other activists are also facing similar charges relating to last year's pro-democracy protests. South Korea's military says they know what happened to a South Korean fisheries official who went missing this week. He was shot dead by troops in North Korean waters, who were then doused his body in oil and set it on fire.
A South Korean official who went missing this week was questioned by North Korean troops, shot dead and cremated, according to the South's military. They said Thursday that the man had disappeared from a fisheries patrol boat and that evidence suggests he was trying to defect to the north. The man had been reported missing Monday, just 10 kilometers south of the northern limit line, a disputed border on the water between the north and south. General An Young-ho from South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff spoke on Thursday.
Our military strongly condemns such an atrocity and strongly demands North Korea provide an explanation and punish those who are responsible.
They said the exact reason the 47-year-old official was shot is still unknown. Citing intelligence sources, the military said the unidentified man appeared to have been questioned on a North Korean boat before he was executed on an order from a superior authority. They also said troops in gas masks then doused the body in oil and set it on fire.
Coming up, winemakers in California are facing huge losses this year. Wildfires that blanketed the West Coast have tainted the region's grape harvest. And Nokia released a new smartphone on Tuesday. The device will star in the upcoming James Bond movie No Time to Die, coming to theaters in November. The White House is honoring companies that created jobs for American workers. Ivanka Trump and Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross gave awards to companies like Volkswagen that hired workers through the Pledge to America's Workers campaign. Here's our latest financial and business news on jobs and the economy.
The National Council for the American Worker led the effort. President Trump created the group in 2018.
Today, over 400 companies have signed our pledge to invest in the skills of over 16 million Americans.
The council is working with companies who pledge to provide training and educational opportunities in high-demand industries like aerospace, construction, and engineering. The Assistant Secretary of the Employment and Training Administration announced the award winners. He thanked Lockheed Martin for their efforts in fulfilling their pledge to the program.
Since making its pledge, the company has achieved nearly half of its commitment to create 8,000 new opportunities by 2023, including over 20 apprenticeship programs that range from aircraft maintenance and assemblers to software, cybersecurity, and engineering.
German carmaker Volkswagen and its U.S. operations pledge to create 15,000 jobs under the program. The company collaborates with educational institutions to provide specialized training.
All the Volkswagen Academy students are dual enrolled at Chattanooga State Community College, which handles classroom instruction of the students and offers them an associate's degree upon completion of the program.
The council also works with the much larger American Workforce Policy Advisory Board. It consists of members from the private sector, education, and state and local governments.
The National Apartment Association and 4 individual landlords are suing the Trump administration over the federal eviction ban. The lawsuit names a Health and Human Services official, the CDC, as well as the CDC's Chief of Staff as defendants. It targets the federal eviction ban that took effect on September 4th. The ban blocks property owners from evicting tenants who can't pay rent because of the pandemic. The landlord's lawyers are saying it's overreach. The CDC argues that it has the authority to act. 007 fans will soon see an unexpected new star come to the big screen, Nokia's latest smartphone. The 5G-compatible 4-lens phone will be featured in the upcoming James Bond movie, No Time to Die.
The new Nokia 8.3 5G is designed to support multiple 5G networks. According to parent company HMD Global, over 40 different RF or radio frequency components have been condensed into one single module.
In fact, our field test in Finland showed our device reaching up to 15% faster data speed versus the other 5G smartphones in the same category.
The new flagship smartphone also comes with a Zeiss 4-lens camera. HMD announced the handset will star in the upcoming James Bond movie, No Time to Die, set to premiere this November. The device costs about $700. HMD also showcased a line of new budget handsets like the Nokia 2.4. The smartphone comes with a 6.5-inch HD Plus screen and 2-day battery life, and retails at an average price of $140.
Its 6.5-inch HD Plus screen uses the cinematic 21:9 format, so you can carry the big screen with you wherever you go.
Sorry Vikas also introduced a range of new accessories, including wireless headphones and speakers. Nokia was once the world's #1 mobile phone maker. HMD Global secured Nokia mobile brand licensing rights in late 2016.
Californian winemakers are facing huge losses this year. That's after smoke from the state's devastating wildfires likely tainted this year's grape harvest. Now growers lack the tools to test how much of the fruit is salvageable.
Wildfire smoke that blanketed the U.S. West Coast states has also penetrated the grapes growing in the region's vineyards. Jim Bernau, founder of Willamette Valley Vineyards, said the longer the smoke lingers, the greater the risk that it'll affect the grapes.
You know, I've been here growing wine grapes for over 38 years, and I have never experienced or seen anything like this.
Dr. Anita Oberholster at the University of California, Davis, explained the wine made from smoke-tainted grapes can taste and smell overly ashy or smoky, and it's not a flavor characteristic most people want.
These compounds don't sit on the outside of the grape. It actually absorbs into the skin, so you can't wash it off.
She's currently working on new early testing methods to tell whether smoke has affected grapes.
If we can predict better, then grape growers know, should I harvest? Should I not harvest? Winemakers know, should I buy the fruit? Should I not buy the fruit, right? It just would make everything so much easier. And we're trying our best, but it's a very, very complex issue.
It's also an expensive problem for growers. West Coast wine is worth a combined $4.5 billion. President of the California Association of Wine Grape Growers, John Aguirre, says the industry may face significant losses if good grapes are rejected for wine production, along with smoke-tainted fruit.
Bottom line is we know
some grapes are smoke damaged. What we don't want is to see good fruit rejected and not processed into wine, but because we lack the tools to understand it, detect it.
Some wineries are not accepting grapes they're contracted to purchase unless tested for smoke taint. That's because the unpleasant taste or smell could seriously harm their brands.
Up next, bars and restaurants in the French city Marseille are set to close this weekend. Case numbers in the nation's major cities are on the rise. And Finland is deploying sniffer dogs at its main international airport. They're looking for traces of the CCP virus as part of a 4-month trial. More of that when we return. Is set for new opening restrictions on bars and restaurants in major cities. It follows the health minister's announcement that CCP virus cases are rising, but the new measures are being met with criticism. Our France correspondent David Vives has the details.
Already heavily hit by the lockdown this year, Paris's bars and restaurants receive another blow. The government announced a partial closure. Paris is classified as being on reinforced alert and faces new restrictions, such as closing bars and restaurants after 10 p.m.
It's now 10 p.m. for us, so in a couple of weeks, maybe a month, we'll all be closed. It's already hard for us. There are no tourists. The French tourists don't come to Paris either. Our turnover is down 50%.
Health Minister Olivier Véran on Wednesday raised the alert level for Paris, along with other major French cities. It's the second highest alert level on the government scale of risk from the virus.
These measures are very trying, but we are convinced that they are necessary.
In Marseille, in the south of France, the government ordered bars and restaurants to close for 2 weeks from this coming Saturday. The decision was made after the infection rate rose to over 250 positive cases across 100,000 inhabitants in the city. Some bars and restaurant owners were upset by the move.
It's important to note that this decision of returning to a lockdown, even a limited one, has been met with severe criticisms. Some politicians criticize the measures for the first time since the beginning of the pandemic. The Marseille mayor said that Macron's government didn't inform her about the decision. She said she won't allow the people of Marseille to be victims of political decisions that no one understands. Reporting by David Vives, NTD News, Paris.
One airport in Finland is trying out a new, cuter method for virus testing passengers. Its new team of sniffer dogs went to work this week, offering a fast, free way to get tested and boost safely.
Finland has deployed sniffer dogs to detect the CCP virus at its main international airport. They are part of a 4-month government-financed trial aiming to find an alternative virus testing method. The Finns hope it will become a cost-effective and quick way to identify infected travelers. 4 dogs were trained by Finland's Smell Detection Association. They started working at the airport on Wednesday.
A good detection dog needs a good nose. The breed doesn't really matter if it's excited about the work. It's not rocket science. It's easy as dogs are using their noses everywhere all the time.
Passengers who agree to take the free test don't have direct physical contact with a dog. They are simply asked to swipe their skin with a wipe. It's then put into a jar and brought to a dog who's waiting in a separate booth.
The idea of sniffing stations started when the city of Vantaa wanted detection dogs at the airport. These dogs don't have any official status, so they aren't allowed to go up and sniff people directly.
It takes one of the dogs just 10 seconds to sniff the sample. They communicate the result by scratching a paw, lying down, or barking.
Coming up, a new crew is preparing for a space flight to the International Space Station. American astronaut Kathleen Rubins will be part of the 3-person crew. A new crew is preparing to travel to the space mission station for a 6-month mission.
The next International Space Station crew took their final pre-launch exams at Star City near Moscow on Wednesday. The Expedition 64 crew includes 2 Roscosmos cosmonauts as well as NASA astronaut Kathleen Rubins.
There's many exciting things on this flight. First of all, it will be the 20th anniversary of the International Space Station. Right there. we will have the first docking of the operational Crew 1 Dragon vehicle. And of course, we have many scientific experiments I'm looking forward to.
Rubin's first mission was in 2016 when she became the first person to sequence DNA in space. The spacecraft is scheduled to take off from Kazakhstan on October 14th.
We are completely focused on the job we have to do. We are planning to perform the flight program properly and at the highest level.
Astronauts have worked on the International Space Station for almost 20 years. They have been testing new technologies and developing the skills to explore increasingly further from our planet.
Do you want to feel happier? Then move to Hawaii. Seriously, it was just rated the happiest state. There's no wonder it's beautiful mountains, great beaches, glorious weather. Of course, happiness isn't all about where you live, but it can help. Wallet Hub looked at what kind of environmental factors are often linked to people's satisfaction with life, like economic, emotional, physical, and social health. The researchers picked ways to measure all that, everything from the rate of depression and unemployment to how much people work, and the Aloha State came out on top. Italy's St. Bartholomew Valley was received a special certification. It's now officially one of the world's best places to gaze at the night sky. A sky illuminated by millions of twinkling stars. That's what the St. Bartholomew Valley in Lignan, Italy is known for. Skies there have achieved international recognition. The area has even been certified as a Starlight Stellar Park by UNESCO's Starlight Foundation. By day, visitors can see mountains, never-ending fields, and grazing cows. But it's nighttime that brings the best views. Giorgia Vasolino lives in Milan, but owns a house just up the hill. She's been coming here since she was a child.
As there are no lights, it's like being inside the star-filled skies. It's completely different from any other experience. The only other place I've seen stars like this is at sea.
Lignan takes the protection of its skies seriously. Public lampposts have been replaced with special LED versions, which are designed to avoid dispersing light upwards. The valley is also home to the Astronomical Observatory of the Autonomous Region of the Aosta Valley. Visitors make the trip there for stargazing lessons every Saturday after dark.
It's unique. It's a natural open sky museum that you can't see anywhere else but here. You can see almost everything they tell you about.
Andrea Bernagozzi, a researcher at the observatory, explained the region's skies and also enriched research activities.
Here, our biggest telescope has an aperture of 81 centimeters. The bigger the telescope, the more light goes in, and the better you can study the cosmos.
But he says gazing at stars is more than just a pleasant pastime. It's part of our heritage.
Our ancestors would organize their lives within their community. For example, the time of sowing and harvest. And that's what astronomic culture is. It's not only looking up at the sky, but recognizing that the sky has accompanied us in our lives, providing a decisive contribution to humanity's survival.
Guided observatory visits are available to the public every Saturday night. And that's all for now. Catch us again at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm Jasmina Davis.